people are congratulating you in your work and everything, there is that constant sense of imposter syndrome. When I have disclosed my autism, I get a kind of a, okay, that sort of response. My mum would ask us for a birthday or Christmas, what's the one thing that you want? And that would be the one thing. I've been accused of pretending to be working class as well. And I think, what is that because of how I talk? Is that how I present myself? It's, I don't understand. It's something, it's the one thing with me and my autism is, I try and present myself as honestly as I am, very much so this is me, take me or leave me kind of attitude.
John grew up working class in Essex, was diagnosed with autism at 4 and spent most of his school years masking it while navigating social challenges and financial barriers that limited his opportunities. But a lifelong love of storytelling led him to pursue film through school, university, and eventually a career behind the camera. He's collaborated with the BFI, created the short film Snapshot during COVID, and produced What Has Changed, a film celebrating the 30th anniversary of the Disability Discrimination Act, amplifying autistic voices. He also teaches autism awareness through the Oliver McGowan Program. In this episode, John gets honest about the double challenge of being both working class and autistic in the film industry, the network barriers, the misconceptions, the moments people question whether he was really working class, and why he believes autism is never one size fits all. Hi John, how you doing? How was that? Was that okay?
Yeah, that was all good, thank you. Yeah, I'm doing all right, thank you.
Good. Yeah, before we get into it, could you tell us a little bit about what your role and what you currently do, just for our audience, please?
Yeah, so at the moment I'm got kind of like freelance filmmaking within writing and directing as well as video editing. But as mentioned as well, I teach. I'm a co-trainer, autistic expert by experience, which I teach as part of the Oliver McGowan Training Program, which is mandatory learning across 2 tiers, catered towards doctors, carers, and nurses around the NHS, as well as various care organisations and whatnot.
Okay, yeah, that's good. Yeah, because this series is about those from working class and lower socioeconomic backgrounds. What would you say working class means to you? How would you define it?
So, growing up in a working class family, I'm one of the 5 siblings, and my mum, I'm incredibly indebted to her. She was the primary caregiver for us, and when I was growing up, I genuinely never knew that we were working class because we were home, we were safe, but it was the little things that added up throughout. So when my mum was telling me that we couldn't go sort of outside to play, and if there was things that were particularly expensive that we wanted, she'd say, "Oh, we don't have the pennies for that," or if there are any holidays or anything advertised, and we thought, "Oh, but my friend from school's got that," or "My friend from school's been on holiday there," and my mum would say, "Well, we don't have the pennies for that." And it was all those little things that added up, and realizing the kind of sort of home and that I've grown up in. And being working class has followed me throughout my life as well. And the main thing that I take away from it all is that any given opportunity, I'll grab with both hands, any gift. So the fact that when my mum would ask us for a birthday or Christmas, what's the one thing that you want? And that would be the one thing. And, that's carried throughout my working life as well as social life. The fact that I don't often I'm not offered as many opportunities as others. So whenever they're creative or just opportunities in general that are possible for me to accept, I always try and make the most of them and grab the opportunities with both hands. And I think that's what working class has meant to me. The fact that you live and you work around your small resources, but they're the most vital resources that you have to hand. And so when someone comes along and offers you something greater, then you think, right now, how am I going to be able to incorporate that, and how am I going to make the most of this? Because there's a chance that something like that might not come along again. And yeah, that's how I've always seen it.
Okay, so you yeah, based on your experience and growing up, it's like by the sounds of it, you had very little, and whatever you did have, you made the most of it, and whatever
Al-
opportunity came your way, you took it with both hands.
Always.
As you mentioned, you're a freelance filmmaker. What kind of made you get into that line of work? What was it that kind of where did it all stem from?
So for me, um, I think from a young age, I enjoyed telling stories, but when I was younger, I didn't know how to properly channel that. So I'd to and fro the idea of books and similar. I mean, I was into a lot of video games when I was younger, but I was more interested in the story aspect behind them.
Hmm.
And as I went through school, I was toying with various ideas. Do I go down a route of acting? Do I do this? Do I do that? And as I was, I'd kind of seen film as a solace. So when I'd had sort of a rather terrible time, especially during secondary school, and I'd be watching films, and that kind of became sort of like a safety net, like a blanket, and that just being able to explore different films and different stories that were told. And it became cumulative right up until I was about 15 or 16. I just decided maybe I could go into this. Maybe I could
Mm.
try filmmaking and writing stories of my own. And that's where it snowballed. So I studied film at college and then subsequently university, and it went from there. And the passion is, it's never faded for me. I'm always sort of absorbing various films or TV shows and really wanting to create my own as a result.
Yep. No, that's yeah, it's a good story there. Um, in terms of because you were diagnosed with autism at 4,
Yeah.
how did that play into like your career and yeah, how much of was that of an impact like growing up and through your early years and then kind of deciding actually let's get into film? How did that play into it all?
So, I mean, when I was 4, when I had the initial diagnosis, I didn't really know. I was kind of in my own bubble. But I
Mm.
got to the age of about 9 or 10 where I started to become incredibly aware, and I would start asking my mum questions. I was thinking, I'd ask her, "Am I weird? I feel like I don't fit in. Am I normal?" And she sat me down and she explained it all to me, and that was the light bulb moment that went off in my head. And from that point on, before I'd even thought about what I want to do in my life career wise, I thought, okay, this is me and who I am.
Mm.
And moving into secondary school, at the time, I thought, um, feel like I will give the bullies more ammo if I'm my true autistic self. So I would mask, but it would ironically backfire because I would copy and parrot various people. And so they would kind of have perceive me as this almost Frankenstein's monsters sort of
Mm.
version of myself. And it would confuse people, it would annoy people. And so as I was working out what I wanted to do, career-wise, as I went into college and I was finding like-minded people who'd seen the same films as me, who liked telling various different stories and were fascinated with that aspect of filmmaking, I slowly started to unmask. And it was only after university and finding employment as well that I just decided to not mask at all. It was it was a physical and a mental drain for me
Mm.
because it just got to a stage where I mean, I still am to an extent, but more so than I was more frustrated than being caught in this catch-22 with job interviews, because I would either mask my way through the interview on the off chance of actually getting the job, and then if I got the job and something went wrong and they'd say, "What's all this about, John? What's
Mm.
going on?" And then I'd explain my autism. They would say, "Oh, why didn't you tell us that in the first place?" But then on the other hand, when I have disclosed my autism, I get a kind of a, okay," that sort of response. And, whether that plays into the final outcome of whether I'm unsuccessful or not for the job in question, I don't know. But perception over the years in particular is been a mixed bag, I mean, in terms of interviews and that. So, but as I was unmasking, I decided to create some short introspective documentaries about myself. Just if nothing else, take to just chime in to the autism discourse,
Mm,
because I noticed it started to gain steady speed. People who were more aware were becoming more and more confident, especially online, to share their personal lived experiences of autism. So I thought I'll chime in on that. And I created a first 16-minute short film called I Have Asperger's, So What? So I was diagnosed with Asperger syndrome, but it's a term that's no longer used. But obviously, there's a lot of people out there that all identify with that term firsthand because that's the one they were given. And I was signposted to an opportunity 2016, 2017. The National Autistic Society had an Autism Uncut film festival, and they were asking for 4-minute short films. So I decided to take what I'd created and paraphrase that into a 4-minute film. And as
mm,
a result, I became a finalist in the aspiring filmmaker category. And it gave me sort of like a boosted sense of confidence as well. And I mean, very much me working class, I felt very much a fish out of water because I'm there.
mm,
I had to get a suited and booted, and I'm there at BAFTA 195 in Piccadilly, and I'm thinking, how'd I end up here? And so that was an amazing opportunity and experience. But through that, I met, and I started forming a creative team of all these people that I'd meet like-minded, which snowballed into my BFI produced short film Snapshot, because it was just from there. Was talking, I'd met with the producer of the film, Sam Barnett, and he could see that I'd wanted to continue, like, sort of springboard off what I'd already started and tell a story of autism and my lived experience, especially maybe a short fictional film. And he put that idea to me, so we backed and forthed it, and it just continued to snowball from there. And I mean, I'm a great admirer of a lot of the BFI funded films. The channel that I'd often go to the most when watching films was Film 4. There, a lot of sort of things that are very alternative and left field I'd end up gravitating towards just because it's different,
mm.
and in those sort of stories that would really resonate with me in different ways and would help inform and shape my creative process as well. And so from there, really, it just with the film Snapshot and that, I just, especially as the more and more discourse grows around autism and neurodivergence, there are so many debates, especially regarding disability benefits. And there are arguments about how, oh, like, are people, is there an overdiagnosis crisis and this, that, and the other? But I mean, and this is why it's continued to help me sort of shape what I want to continue
Mm,
doing regarding these topics, because of how it's a continuous, there's a continuous conversation around it, and I feel like that I can continuously chime in my lived experiences as well as other people's lived
mm,
experiences with autism and neurodivergence, which are very similar to mine, and just shape stories out of that, which is, how Snapshot came to pass as
yeah,
well, and using that as an educational tool, if nothing else, but also having other autistic and neurodivergent people watch it and relate and connect to it, and then they can show other people and say, This is how it feels like for me," especially with employment, as well. It was one thing that I've wanted to challenge. There's a common misconception that disabled people and just like autistic and people in general are rich, are minted, and that's not the case. They think, "Oh, well, you're on benefits, you've got this, you've got that,"
mm,
and it's like, well, if you break it down, to the minutiae and you realize where all these costs go, then you realize, well, no, we're not better off than you. It's the fact that I've had this double barrier my whole life because they're kind of interplay against each other. So people think, with autism, they always think about the can'ts. And then
Mm.
with working class on top of that, it's a similar thing because I was the first person out of my family to go to university. No one in my family is connected to film or creative industry, so I'm the first one in. So I've never had any of those initial
Mm.
connections. It's just through by chance that I meet people, and then that it snowballs from there. And yeah, so that's just sort of the long short of it really, and
Yeah.
how yeah, so
Now, I was going to say actually, like coming from like working class background, especially with your autism, how did you actually find it when you actually managed to break into the film industry, and how was it navigating that world?
um, it's very much because, the fact the idea that the BFI, short film funded by BFI was put towards me, it was very much like a pinch me, I'm dreaming moment, and
Mm.
there was that continuous uncertainty when we put the application form in at the end of 2019, because back then, you were allowed to submit as many times throughout the year, but then post-COVID, it's basically one shot a year, one application round,
Yeah.
and that's it. So you end up getting thousands of applications that the BFI have to sort of filter through and work out what ones would be greenlit. And so when we were greenlit for funding at the start of 2020, I was thinking, "Oh, I'm actually getting this story made." And then COVID became an obstacle in the March of the same year, and we ended up, having to develop the film over Zoom meetings, over Teams and that. And there was still just that continuous uncertainty, the fact that, is this actually going to get made, or there is also that part of me that thinks, like typical really, because
Mm.
from whether it's informed by my working class background or not, I'm used to a lot of knockbacks and sort of
Mm.
hardships where you think you're getting somewhere and then another obstacle presents itself and you think, "Oh, what now?"
Mm.
And it continued that way, but eventually we did manage to get it made, and that realization that I've made this. And I can remember when I showed the film to my wife to watch, which, I mean, she pretty much knew it back to front because I didn't stop talking about it.
Yeah.
Honestly, it was, but that was the thing. It was because there was so much uncertainty around it. I was
Mm.
trying to make the most of it from start to finish. But I think, the fact that I could see the immense pride because she saw my name on the at the start on the credits. The fact that this is something that I was fortunate enough for it to be greenlit and made, and this is my story, and that was realized. And and that's the thing as well with working class. It's the little victories as well.
Yeah.
So when we took it to the film festival circuit, we submitted to 38 film festivals and it managed to get into 8. And for a first time, there's no, it's relatively unknown cast and that,
Mm.
and it was on quite a lowish budget at the time. Um, each selection in itself was a win for us. It was a win for me, and then the fact that it won one award was kind of, I was genuinely speechless. It was at Wigan and Lee, and it was its premiere screening at a film festival. When we went, and we just thought, "Oh, they're gonna screen these films, it's gonna be great."
Mm.
We didn't realize there were awards until we saw them on the pedestal as we walked into the screening, and then at
Oh,
the end Snapshot won Best International Short Film, and I was genuinely speechless. I thought, "What?" And that's the thing, you 'cause you're so not used to that kind of environment when you're
mm.
throttled into it, and when people are congratulating you and your work and everything, there is that constant sense of imposter syndrome,
Yeah.
definitely. And yeah, that's continued with me. And now, I mean, we made that film about about 5 or 6 years ago now.
Mm.
I mean, still now, I've got all of these other short film projects that I'd love to realize, but I mean, not back. I kind of am like back to square one a little bit with it
Mm.
all. It's trying to find other outlets because the idea with the BFI Short Film Fund is it's the first step, and then you're supposed to sort of progress and progress.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it doesn't often come to pass. And yeah, so again, I just have all these ideas and I try and share them around with as many
Mm.
people because I would love to just sort of continue that momentum, especially there's a couple of ideas that would definitely connect up with Snapshot and take that kind of discourse and similar storytelling further.
It's interesting that you mentioned like that should have been kind of the jump start to your film career, like set you off down the path. Has Do you reckon there's elements because of your autism, or as I mentioned in your intro, there were people that didn't think you were working class, or do you think that those elements kind of played into it?
I think so. I mean, the fact that with autism, sometimes I need to be prompted for proactivity.
Mm.
So, and it can be difficult as well when you're trying to seek out the resources to continue your career further as well. But also, on the other hand, I have other commitments as well. So I'm a dad and I'm also a carer for my wife.
Mm.
So it's kind of juggling that as well as trying to keep that other aspect of my career and that moving forward. So again, I think it's just going back to small steps really and working with what resources I have. So I mean, when we made Snapshot, we were living up in and around South Yorkshire, and then we've
Mm.
moved down. So I'm now based in Peterborough, and it took a while. I had other health issues that I had to deal with first, but then as I was exploring and trying to connect and network with people in Peterborough, that in itself is snowballed as well. So you mentioned the short film Watch Change that
Yeah.
came last year, and that was based off a commission with Peterborough Presents. So they ran a previous exhibition called Reasonable Adjustments, and this one was the follow up to like Reasonable Adjustments 2. And I just
Mm.
pitched this idea that through community engagement, through these workshops, I could get people to creatively express their opinions in and around change and discourse regarding like disability perception and growth and how that has all changed either within themselves or within society over the last 30 years since the Disability Discrimination Act. And I remember making a personal connection to it because that was the year when I was diagnosed autistic when that came into
Mm.
play as well. So there was really that personal connection for me. But rather than throw a lot of myself into this, I did the opposite and just decided to try and collate as many voices as possible and just say, well, what does this person think? Or like via a poem or just chatting with them as they're creating
Yeah.
something in an art workshop and just finding voices and telling stories that way. And it was a completely different direction with Snapshot. Everything was scripted. You've got this, you've,
Mm.
you've got script, you've got shot list, storyboard, edit decision list, you've got everything like that. Whereas with What's Changed, it was just almost like just collecting everything together and then trying to make sense of it. And
Yeah.
that's what, and you frame a narrative out of it. And I found that also quite fascinating and quite an engrossing experience all the same.
Mm. So yeah, because you've mentioned the Disability Discrimination Act, have you noticed like there has been kind of changes within the film industry, well, since you've been in it? Has there been like an active role in people actually trying to make real change?
There definitely has, I think. It's been a slow and steady progress. I know it's kind of, again, it's little victories, the little things. So you've got access coordinators as well as
Mm.
well-being coordinators for sets, especially more middle to high-end productions and that. And I know, um, yeah, there are a lot of disabled and neurodivergent voices that are growing more confident in terms of creative expression to try and get their voices out there,
Mm.
which again, it's a kind of a double-edged sword for me because yes, I'm one of them as well. But as a result, because of that continuous awareness and discussion, there's always that risk of kind of getting caught up and lost with everyone else, especially if when it comes to short film funds or similar, you've got everyone competing for the same thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think in the film industry in general, it is a very sort of quite competitive place as it is.
Mm.
It can be cutthroat at times. So there is that aspect as well. But I hold no resentment. If anything, I'm happy to encourage it. The fact that yes, there are people out there that have stories that need to be told as well as mine, and
Yeah.
the fact that there's more is very very slowly, but there is more awareness and acceptance and understanding, especially around autism, neurodivergence, and disability. The fact that yeah, people can sit there and go, yeah, I can write a story. I have
Mm.
something to say. I feel confident enough to say something without feeling. I mean, the thing is, right? Even as as long as I've lived, you're always going to get that prejudice and discrimination in every pocket of corner. You will always get that one negative voice, but
Mm.
it's finding a way to sort of push through and ignore that because for people like that, it all boils down to, I don't like you because you're different, and that's it, really,
Yeah.
which I've always found quite perplexing because I think it'd be quite boring if we're all the same.
Yeah.
I like the uniqueness that everyone has, especially with in and around neurodivergent voices as well, because of how we look at the world differently and how we problem solve differently. If I'm creative problem solving and someone says, "Well, I didn't think of it that way, John," it's like, but in my mind, it felt like the most logical way of solving said
Mm.
problem. And, all of that should be celebrated instead of seen as a negative, as a
Yeah. Yeah.
hindrance, really.
Yeah. No, and in terms of like the working class aspect, have you noticed there's a change for that? Are you noticing more people from working class backgrounds breaking into the industry?
Yeah, I think so, but I think it is very much a similar problem to with disabled and autistic and neurodivergent voices as well. Is the fact that more opportunities are opening, so more people are going to come
Mm.
flooding in. But I think I remember reading about an article about how there are people of middle class stature posing to be working class, which I've
Mm.
often found quite obscene.
Yeah.
I've been accused of pretending to be working class as well, and I think, what is that because of how I talk? Is that how I present myself? I don't understand. It's something.
Mm.
It's the one thing with me and my autism is, I try and present myself as honestly as I am. Very much so. This is me. Take me
Yeah.
or leave me kind of attitude. And so to think that on top of that, I would pretend, it doesn't make any sense to me. So yeah, and that's the thing when you have all of these other working class opportunities. If I was to try and sort of chime in as well, do I
Mm.
get caught in all of the negatives as well? Or
Yeah.
and I know from their end and selection processes, it gets incredibly difficult because they only have so many people they can say yes to as well.
Yeah.
So again, but I think it is getting there, the fact that, not everything exists in and around London film-wise. There is
Mm.
something beyond London. The fact and that there is proof to that. The fact that when films have been funded and been made in and around Yorkshire, and then when those films have gone stateside, and American filmmakers are looking at the likes of Yorkshire and thinking, "Oh, we could come here and film," and the fact that it's
Yeah.
opened those opportunities elsewhere, and it hasn't been as sort of gate kept. I mean, there is still a lot of gatekeeping and snobbery that I've experienced, but I mean, at times it's just having to roll with the punches and just keep going on through.
Yeah.
And the fact that if people are there accusing you of pretending or otherwise, then that they don't know you at all, and it's just kind of move on and carry on through.
Yeah. No, it's yeah, because I was you briefly mentioned, like, Yorkshire and stuff. In terms of, like, locations across the country, has that ever been a sticking point for you? Because you mentioned you're in Yorkshire now in Peterborough. Has that ever been an issue for yourself?
Yeah, so at present I don't drive. So especially, I mean, I grew up in Essex, and I remember when I graduated from university, so I studied in Southend, and when I was applying for various jobs, um, I a lot of them were London based. So I was like, okay, it's having to commute into
Mm.
London, London Underground and whatnot. And then there are these other locations, and you think, right, well, that's a half an hour drive, but on a bus or trains or whatever, it's 3 plus hours, and that's not viable at all. And so
Yeah.
you end up losing out on these opportunities because you don't have that initial outlay for driving lessons and
Mm.
maintaining a car and whatnot. I mean, I used to have a moped years and years ago, but I effectively ran that into the ground. And the thing is, as well, there were certain locations that required motorways, and my moped was a 50cc and it's not allowed. So I
Yeah.
was like, well, is there any other way, any other A road or B road? And usually there wasn't. So again, I would just be back to square one and thinking, right, is there any way I can commute this journey via a bus or train? And usually the
Mm.
answer was no. So yeah, logistics definitely have had a part to play in some opportunities that I have missed out on. But I mean, thankfully, when you're around sort of supportive people as well. I can remember with Snapshot, most of it was filmed, well, actually, all of it was filmed in and around Sheffield, and I was about 12 miles away from Sheffield.
Oh,
But
okay.
thankfully, I was able to get lifts to and fro from
Yeah.
where we're filming location, and obviously that helped. But a huge amount because it just saved so much time. You know, I didn't have to walk a mile and a half to the train station and then get the train to Sheffield and then work out, okay, where's the location based from the train station. And yeah, so I think that always helps when you're around people who get it and
Mm.
realize, okay, well, you're going to need a lift from here, you're going to need a lift from there. I mean, it's similar with my Oliver McGowan work as well. There'll be times where there'll be a training venue that's about 3 miles from the train station. So I've had to ask, is there any chance that I can get to this train station, but can I get a lift to
Yeah.
the venue from said train station? And usually that's not a problem at all. So yeah, it definitely had a part to play. So lots of opportunities that I've missed out on as a result of locations not being
Mm.
viable, because there's that assumption that, especially when you're at a certain age, that you must be earning this amount a year, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you should have a car, and you should have this, you should have a mortgage, you should have this, that, and the other. And obviously, I've not. So
Yeah. No, it's interesting that you mentioned the financial aspect there because, as you mentioned earlier on, when you were growing up, you talked about how your mum's having to save the pennies and um, those kind of things. Like when we previously talked, you mentioned there was some school trips that you can go to, and yeah, coming from working class,
yeah,
I
that
suppose that would be a common occurrence. Could you tell us a little bit about that? Yeah.
yeah. I remember that in school there was a skiing trip, and that was a lot of money that I couldn't afford to do that. And I can remember when I was in I started college, there was an opportunity to go to Los Angeles, and they were like, "Right, we're
Mm.
going to need this amount of money up front." And I'm thinking, I can't afford that. I've only just started being on EMA and all that, which was
Yeah.
what was there at the time. And so there was other opportunities I missed out on. Then similar with university, there was a similar trip that happened, and I had to give it a miss, and it was just one of them things. But it just when you're used to having to miss out on those opportunities, is especially from kind of a young age,
Mm.
it's easier to take a step back and think, okay, I'm not going to be able to do this because I can't afford it, and you just move on that way. And yeah, it's just how it goes.
Yeah, no, I think sometimes, yeah, the financial situation, if you've grown up struggling, I think later on in life, you know how to be a bit more savvy with money. And yeah, you know, okay, growing up, I struggled with not having any money. So when you're an adult, you actually know, okay, I can manage this because I'm used to that. Is that something you'd agree with?
Definitely, that's really shaped how I handle the finances I'm given. I have a tendency to squirrel, really, if I'm given
Mm.
money, and I try and nest away as much as I can, and then it's there. But sometimes it's easier said than done. Sometimes you need to dip into that savings because
Yeah.
something crops up, and and it's there, but and next thing you know, it's not, and then you have to start all over again. So, I mean, if I think I'd be the same if someone just was to give me a lot of money. I'd probably behave in a similar way in
Mm.
terms of financing. A lot of it I probably wouldn't touch. It would just be squirreled away because I don't think I'd ever get this amount again. Very similar to opportunities. Same with finances. It would be a case of, well, I've got this amount now. I don't know if I'm getting any more. I'm going to have to try and sort of, manage to the penny, really,
Yeah.
because yeah, with that same mindset.
You briefly mentioned it, the Oliver McGowan program that you help and work with. Could you tell us a little bit about that and what that does? What's that about?
Yeah, so Oliver McGowan was this bright, amazing young autistic man who he sadly lost his life at the hands of poor practice. So he had epilepsy, and the hospitals and doctors were trying to manage it. But unfortunately, they kept giving him medication that he was having adverse reactions to, and every
Mm.
time his parents were trying to advocate for him and say, "Can you not keep giving this to him? He keeps having adverse reactions that could cost him his life." Those requests were being ignored. He had what's known as a hospital passport that details his autism. That was put in a
Mm.
drawer and ignored. When Oliver tried to stim by pacing as a way of trying to calm himself down, nurses would restrain him onto a bed, and it was that kind of thing that added up, and in the end, unfortunately, because they kept giving him these antipsychotic medications for his epilepsy, the adverse reactions just kept piling, and it cost him his life. So,
Mm.
his mum, this tenacious character, continuously for years protested to the government about setting up a mandatory training program, and
Mm.
that's how the Oliver McGowan training was born. And the idea is that it's up and down the country, different teams, different trainers, whoever deliver two kinds of training. So tier one is a 1 hour webinar. So when
Mm.
I do that, we have a script to follow, and it's myself and a co-trainer who has lived experience of a learning disability, because obviously you've got all that side of it. Unfortunately, Oliver's case is not an isolated one. You have a lot of people learning disabilities that end up with their lives lost because of poor practice as well,
Mm.
because of misconceptions and misunderstandings, similar with autism. And so with the 1 hour webinar, we read a script, we write kind of like an open Q&A in between, in and around it, and keep to the hour. And the tier two training is in person. It's done through slideshows. And so in the morning is the learning disability module. And then in the afternoon is the autism one, where I come in and I part deliver the slides with statistics and information,
Mm.
demonstration videos, but I also intertwine my shared lived experience. So there's a topic on intersectionality, and that's where I chime in about how I'm working class and autistic, and both
Yeah.
have been double barriers for me. And I've been doing that for 2 or 3 years now, and I found it incredibly rewarding. And again, sort of the little victories when you get doctors and carers and nurses coming up to you at the end and thanking you. I mean, something as small as a fist bump has made my day. Someone just came up to me
Yeah.
and gave me a fist bump, and that was all I needed. The fact that they were like incredibly grateful that it wasn't just another death by PowerPoint.
Yeah.
It was engaging, it was interesting, and it was helping them absorb the information better, especially when you get these doctors who've had previous autism training, and it's very by the book. It's very academic. There's no personality
Yeah.
involved. It's very much like, this is what autism looks like in everyone. Whereas with the
Mm.
training, we encourage the difference, we encourage the uniqueness that neurodivergence has, and the fact that every co-trainer as well who delivers it will have their own individual shared and lived experiences as well to
Yeah.
boot. And it's something I'd love to continue to do really. So
Yeah, no, no, it's yeah, it's highly commendable with what you're doing, and yeah, it's great to hear that you're able to kind of pass on your lived experience. Um, yeah, I was gonna say actually because you approached me like to be a guest on here, and like when you mentioned that you were autistic filmmaker, and I said to you previously like, I've never interviewed someone like yourself, so it's like, how would you kind of approach it, and would you be willing to talk more about it? And I suppose you doing this training with the Oliver McGowan program, are you what I'm trying to say is like, yeah, like are you like an open book then, or are you quite reluctant to talk about certain aspects?
um as I've got older, I'm pretty much an open book, and sometimes it can throw people my honesty. I try to be very transparent with it all, and there are times where I'll try to be tactful and that, but I mean, with certain topics, I've never really felt the need to sugarcoat it. I feel
Mm,
like it needs to be addressed as it is. Same with my storytelling. So with my short film Snapshot, there are you'll get some mixed opinions about how um people feel uncomfortable because of
mm,
how it throttles you into the like, it puts you in the main character's shoes and how he perceives the world, the noises, and how everything can be too much and feel very distressing and uncomfortable. And
yeah,
some people step away from that because I think that's a bit much. But also, I felt like I don't want to shy away from that because I want to show people so they can see for themselves. And it's very much like when I talk about my experiences. So a few months back with the Oliver McGowan training, there's a topic where we talk about mental health and how about 80% of autistic and neurodivergent people will have mental health issues for most of their life.
yeah,
And obviously, I'm no exception. And this person put their hand up and asked, how can, like, they couldn't understand why with autistic people there would be mental health issues. So I then put them in my shoes and I explained to them, well, if you think about the misunderstandings, the frustrations, this, and I
mm,
and I was adding all of this on and saying, well, this is why, as a result, I've personally had issues with anxiety and clinical depression for about half my life. And these are struggles that will never go away because it all feeds into the autism. Because with it all, there will always be those setbacks with social and communication skills. I mean, it's like I can imagine if people are watching this as well and thinking, "Well, you're coming across very well and this, that, and the other.
mm,
You're so eloquent," but they don't see the behind the scenes as well. The fact that when talking about all these topics, I've probably had these rehearsed in my head for God knows how long, and
mm,
I'll always have notes and prompts with me, and that's the other side that people don't see. And yeah, so when and this person, when I was sharing about mental health experiences and that's how they managed to understand it a little bit more as well. So
yeah. No, I suppose, like you mentioned earlier, when you were growing up, you were having to mask a lot. Is that something quite common then with people with autism?
yeah, it is quite common, and there are some people who have masked for so long they've almost become desensitized and like they don't know who they are. There's
Mm,
almost that disassociation with themselves. And but I mean, it depends. Every autistic person's had a completely different upbringing. Mine, I'm often, I'm incredibly grateful for my mum and the upbringing that I had because as soon as I had my diagnosis, my mum went straight to the library and she dug up every book and resource
yeah,
that she could find on autism. And there are some people that haven't had those support that kind of support network with their friends or family. So then they'll have different outlooks on life, and some people hold mask as kind of a survival technique, as a coping strategy. And then, I mean, the biggest debate in and around autism, especially, is you'll find a lot of girls and women getting diagnosed autistic in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. They'll have
Mm.
that kind of epiphany and think, oh God, that makes so much sense. But
Mm.
because of previous research of autism has been primarily done on boys, that's often been kind of the stereotypical framing of autism, the
Yeah,
idea
yeah.
that we're all obsessed with cars and trains, or we can recite every airport in the country and this, that, and the other. And then it often gets mixed in with savant syndrome, which is completely different as well. And the fact is, yeah, you'll find a lot of girls who are autistic and neurodivergent will mask, and they mask better than boys as well because they learn how to camouflage quicker. They learn
Mm.
how to adapt quicker than boys. I mean, is the fact that I was so outwardly presenting as a toddler and a child, it was very explicit to the point where
Yeah.
when I was diagnosed by a speech therapist, she said to my mum, he's a textbook case, very, very outwardly presenting. But yeah, because of that, there are a lot of people who present in completely different ways than they do. They end up getting missed. I mean,
Mm.
there's a lot of still a lot of boys and men that end up getting missed as well. But it seems more so women because of this framing around it as well, this perception of what autism actually is.
Yeah. No, no, that's really interesting. So, yeah, in terms of autism, are you finding a lot of people are a bit more aware of it and a bit more clued up on it, or do you feel like there is still room for people to kind of learn and find out more?
I think, yeah, there is still a bit to go because there's more understanding and awareness of what autism entails. But I think because it's not, because it's not a disability or condition that can be fit into tick boxes,
Mm.
it's not a one size fits all. We all
Yeah.
don't walk and talk the same. I think that there are still people out there that are finding that concept quite difficult to grasp because it's the fact that, I mean, by design, we're all unique individuals, irrespective of neurodivergence, autism, or whatever. We're all unique. But the fact that on top of that, it almost intensifies, and yes, there are shared characteristics and traits as well. So, and the fact that there's been more awareness and more understanding as, especially in and around social media, and I imagine as well during COVID and lockdown, a fair few people had that epiphany when they had, when the whole world felt like it stopped. It gave other people that time of self-reflection
Yeah.
and realization as well. And I do always sympathize with people more so, like, I really do feel for people who end up with late diagnoses because I thought this is why I'm so fortunate, the fact that I was diagnosed younger. Because honestly, if I'd got to 34 and I didn't know I was autistic, I'd be driving myself up the wall. I'd be thinking, what is wrong with me?
Yeah.
Why this? Why that? But the fact that I had all the answers as early as possible when something is very much like my autism, to do with my autism, then I just, it's easier to deal with
Yeah. Yeah.
knowing. It's that knowing, and ironically, that is very much can be part and parcel of a trait of autism and neurodivergence, is having that certainty, the
Yeah.
I know this because of that, that kind of thing. The things that you can control, because there are a lot of autistic people out there that find it difficult to deal with things that they can't control. And, and that's just part and parcel of it all.
No, no, it's really, really interesting stuff that you're talking about there, and yeah, like you said, like being diagnosed very early on. I suppose you're one of the fortunate ones to be able
Yeah.
to kind of then be able to manage that growing up and like yeah, working and being able to manage that. If anyone's from working class who with similar kind of background as yourself with autism and working class. Is there any kind of advice you would give them if they wanted to get into the field?
I think it's just with using the limited resources that they might have is perseverance, really. I mean, and the fact that with the opportunities that I've had, they tend to happen when I least suspected it as well. But I'm
Mm.
hoping with other people's perseverance, it's all well and good if you put if you upload a video on YouTube and it gets millions of views, which, is a rarity unless you're in that kind of market.
Mm.
If it's this anomaly that happens, then, it is amazing. But I found that it only takes that one view, that one person for you to approach you and say, I like what you're doing. I could present you with this,
Mm.
and I think it's through that perseverance and trying to make, because I mean, I'm not one of these people who it seems to be very archaic advice. The idea of just go out and make a film. You have a phone, go out and make a. It's not that easy anymore, honestly. I mean, you could if you wanted to, but then there's so much more to it. There's so much more of a scope to it. You want people who help you try and realize your project, get as much out of it as you. You want
Yeah.
that kind of equity, especially regarding pay as well. And I mean, the other archaic advice, which I'm glad is slowly being outed, is the idea of you working your way from bottom to top. Like
Yeah.
be a runner, be a T-boy, whatever. Like that doesn't work anymore either, because chances are you'll stay in that position because you'll be seen as a commodity, and you'll be like, oh, he's a runner, he's done this, that, and ever.
Mm.
So I think it's just kind of doing it for yourself, really, and having that perseverance with the small amount of resources and just creating things, even if there's no end goal in sight, even if you think, well, I'm not going to be able to afford to put this into festivals, but at least I can make something and share it with a
Yeah.
few people. Again, it's the little victories in that, and you try and build upon that in different ways,
Mm.
really. And I'm sure eventually an opportunity will knock. There will be something which could take you further than that.
Yeah. And if anyone wants to check out your work, do you have like an online presence, Instagram, website, anything like that?
So I collate everything on Linktree, and that's under JCLX1V, and that'll have everything that has. So I've got an Instagram, I've got a YouTube, and then I've got all links to everything. So to my film snapshot, to what's changed, to other interviews and everything
No?
that I've done that I try and collect together. And then yeah, from there, and I'm always happy to connect and to chat with people. I mean, so with my Instagram in particular, though it's private, I'm happy if people send a request. I'm more than happy to chat and connect that way. I'm always looking to network and listen to other people's ideas and share, and because that's all you can do, because that's another key thing I think in terms of advice, as well as perseverance. When you find you kind of your groups, your circles of people, your like-minded creatives, that also helps, because from previous experience, if you're trying to work with someone who has a completely different outlook and mindset to you, then it's not going to work. Whereas, it's what I felt like made Snapshot work. We were on a skeleton crew of about 10 people, and the fact that we were all there with that like-minded shared
Mm.
vision, it becomes something of a hive mind, and that when you're all singing off the same hymn sheet, you end up creating something bigger and greater than you anticipated. And I think similar could be said with other people. You continue to meet people, continue to connect and network. It doesn't have to be in person. You can do online.
Yeah.
There is that. Though it's those kind of resources that you can channel and tap into for sure.
No, yeah. Thanks again, John. I'll share your link tree in the description so people can connect and hopefully potentially collaborate and share ideas like you just said. But no,
Definitely.
thanks again for sharing your story and kind of shining light on autism and how that is in the film industry and how you've managed to kind of work with that throughout your life and career. So no, thank you
No
again, John.
problem. Yeah, no worries.
Thank
Thank
you
you for
again.
having me on.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Initial Step. If you resonate with the stories we share and have a similar background you'd like to talk about, we'd love to hear from you. Get in touch and maybe you'll be featured in an upcoming episode. And don't forget to like, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Be sure to check out our previous episodes for more inspiring stories. Until next time, I'll see you in the next one.